Hey, take a peek back on Instagram, depending when you're watching this or when it gets published. Uh, right now, I think it's one or two deep, where there's a post that's talking about squat depth. And the squat depth post was really just trying to show that there are different times and reasons as to why squatting at different depths may be acceptable, where in other situations it wouldn't be acceptable. And that's something that I believe in strongly. Now, a little bit more context to that post, where you're basically seeing oxidative training. In the Eastern Bloc literature, you might find it translated into statodynamic. I call it 2020 as defined by the tempo. 2 second descent, 0 seconds in the reversal. So you are never ever stopping or resting on the box in a different format like a box squat. We're just using the squat as a depth gauge. Now, zero means you touch it and you go. There is zero rest period at that bottom. 2 seconds to return, and then you'll notice, which is really what you see the young lady doing that Zerker. She's really cutting it at the top, much more than cutting it in the bottom. She's squatting to a 12-inch box, which is it might be a touch above parallel for her. But the goal of never stopping and keeping that very, very slow pace has a couple different masters. Number one, the reason we're doing this in the first place is to specifically deliver type 1 hypertrophy. So all muscles have all fibers, some have more than others. But when we do want to have a focus of type 1, the reason would be because the primary aerobic nature of those fibers, they have more mitochondria. So now when you are looking at a repeat sprint athlete, which is really what general fitness is probably going to funnel into as well, really what we're after is having these enormous amounts of reserves. So as you move later into your intervals, later into your sets, you do have a little bit more firepower when those type 1s, which are not ideal to deliver energy in heavy or explosive movements, they can do something. Clearly, type 1 hypertrophy would explain what you see in bodybuilders, where if you look at a bodybuilder of a certain high level and you look at a power lifter, clearly the hypertrophy is different, but the power lifter is much, much stronger. And part of that reason, as you probably will see in bodybuilding, a very, very controlled descent or eccentric. And obviously at this point, we know that overall hypertrophy is going to be enhanced by getting into the biggest stretched position. Okay, so we're kind of cutting those pieces out necessarily if you were to squat very, very high. And why would you do that here? Well, I think in this case, we probably have a little bit more leeway to deliver something that might be sport specific. Now, I don't think it's necessary. And typically how I would coach 2020, we would probably go to the normal depth. I don't know why we wouldn't, other than there's reasons for pain or some kind of orthopedic compromise. But I do think cutting it early has the value of increasing more edema, increasing more acidosis that will stimulate a hormonal impact that you would typically only get with heavy, heavy loads. So there's a lot of backstory, a lot of reasons that changing the range of motion, changing the tempo, what is it that you're really, really going after? So in this case, you're probably leaving significant force production or strength goals on the table. You're certainly not training for explosiveness. However, if you use this phase correctly, perhaps for as long as 8 weeks after injury, after deconditioning, post-season, you're really delivering a very foundational level of GPP, general physical preparedness, so that in the next phase, you've got even more firepower to get more quality reps, more quality sets, more quality microcycles. When we see at times, you will actually see vertical jump go up as a result of that 8-week block. Now, how does that possibly happen when you're never overloading force or speed? We're staying in that type 1 wheelhouse by moving very, very lightweight, 20 to 50% maximum, and at a very, very slow pace. 2020 is not the only one, okay? You could go longer, but maybe that would not be any more effective than what we see at a 2020. Now, how did that happen? How did you increase vert when you did not train for those relevant qualities? Well, the answer is you are probably so significantly overtrained prior to this phase that this is the answer as to how what appears to be understimulative types of models actually appear to deliver. They didn't really deliver it, they just allowed you to express it, they allowed you to expose it. And by almost looking at an active recovery, sometimes we'll find very, very low volume, heavy weight, but not like super, not maximal, but certainly not nothing. You may find that would also act as an active recovery where all of a sudden you've never pressed more than 3 wheels and now you're pressing 3.5, but you never even exceeded 275 or 265. There's a lot of programs that can deliver that. So again, I think a lot of those things got missed in that post where we were just talking about squat depth or how high you finish. There's a very, very specific reason that you'd be trying to do that in that oxidative training program. Again, I would still touch the chest, even though you don't have to. I think one of the things that I would probably, in the squats, and again, 2020, we're using a lot of the main lifts, but in bodybuilding, you can certainly do it on any of the machines. What we're really trying to find here is a happy medium between what depth you do want to achieve versus what might be sport specific. And that's really where, when you see in the bench press, you see in the squat, none of these loads are ever going to exceed high levels, but you are under the bar for a good minute. If you're going to do 10 reps, you're approaching 40 seconds minimum. And would you actually get another 20 seconds from those reversals? Probably not, but you're approaching a minute of non-stop loaded movement. And usually I'll say by rep 7, at least on the second set, then you're probably going to start to make a face or maybe even yell out a little bit. Now, there's other parts of the protocols on how we would approach 2020, and we talk about that quite a bit on EPP. There's a lot of reasons to do this. It could even be exclusively what you do if that's what floats your boat, because it is very, very similar to what you see in bodybuilding and how having extreme hypertrophy does not always have to happen with heavy weight. So obviously, I think the big thing in depth of bench press and squat, if you're using, and I think I do say this in the video, if you're using weight that compels you to have to cut it, then I think that's a mistake. I believe I said in the post that I think that's dumb. 1 inch could be 100 pounds in a competitive squat. So I think we would find a little bit of a happy medium if you're training for different capacities. But again, my preference would still be to have maximum depth to the chest or even beyond, so you can get more of a stretch, so you can create a little buffer or maybe even create some explosiveness by creating work capacity in that range, some connective tissue in that range. So there's a lot of directions to go that post didn't get into, and it's probably worthy of maybe even a Q&A at some point. So if the whole oxidative training approach is something that you want to hear about, shoot me a DM on Instagram, shoot it through the website. Maybe we'll put something together in a Q&A about this particular type of training program. Oxidative, statodynamic, 2020 is just naming the tempo. I don't think that's an official thing, but you'll find it in the literature or other people talking about type 1 hypertrophy training. And that's really the context to why you would change your squat depth.